Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. This is the STEM Files, where we serve as the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. We took a year off to get some things straight. We got some things straight, and now we're back at it again. This is the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. I like the best and the brightest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Tonight's episode, we're going to be building with return guest, Dr. Jabril Muhammad, biomedical scientist with Morehouse School of Medicine. We're going to be talking about the science of Black power. Once again, that's the science of Black power. So much to unpack here. Family, stay tuned for more after this.
You believe in these false prophets, I say I bet he lying. No football, New York City Giants. Girl dad, rest in peace to Kobe Bryant. When we teaching our babies, we teach them heavy science. Heavy science. Heavy science. When we teaching our women, we teach them heavy science. Heavy science. Heavy science. When we teach men, we teach them.
Peace and love. Hey, this is Coach Naira.
All right. So, once again, as our beloved brother Papoose says in our opening intro, we teach men, women, and children heavy science. I am Tariq Muhammad, aka Tariq Cardiac. I'm a biomedical research scientist with a concentration in cardiovascular pathobiology, which is the study of how diseases form in the heart and blood vessels. I'm joined by my right hand, my partner in righteousness, my brother, best friend, Jabril. Tell the people who you are, please.
Yes, sir. Peace and love, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Jabril Muhammad, a.k.a. Jabrillion Engineer. I'm a civilian mechanical engineer with a focus of naval ship fluid systems and a background in material science and engineering. That's the study of the various materials classes and how they can be utilized for different applications, making things faster, stronger, more effective, more efficient. I'm happy to be back. I'm excited for a nice conversation. Let's get into it, family.
Absolutely. So without any further ado, we don't like to talk about ourselves on the STEM Files. We like to elevate our guests. But before we do that, family, tonight's episode is dedicated to a very special individual. One of the things that Jabril and I pride ourselves on is having so much in common. And we also have a mutual mentor, a mutual brother, a mutual friend in common as well. Brother David Hassan out of Philadelphia. Recently, his wife, Sister Fahida, made her transition, and want to extend our love, our condolences, and our prayers to the Hassan family. And we want to also just share with you all that our Hassan family, especially Brother David and his wife, beloved wife, Sister Fahida, were lovers of the STEM Files. We were lovers of them. They were lovers of us, and they really inspired us, and it really encouraged us to do what we currently do. Matter of fact, had Brother David not introduced me to Jabril almost 10, 11 years ago now, there would be no STEM Files.
That's right.
We want to give a tremendous thanks to their family and continue to keep them in prayer, elevate them in prayer, and may Allah forever be pleased with our beloved sister.
That's right.
Jabril, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Pardon me, I didn't hear you. So, like we said, family, we don't want to talk too much, right? The title tonight is The Science of Black Power. And I really want us to sit on that. We're in a great and trying time. We've been that way for some time, but there's a lot of things happening very fast in our society. And we as a people are a bit split as to where we need to go and how we need to move forward to be able to have some level of gain to secure ourselves. So when you think about science or the science of something, it's studying something to understand it better for a particular application, and then of Black power. So we want to know what truly makes us powerful and how we are to be judged in that way moving forward to truly be a people that can create systems and infrastructure for ourselves. So without further ado, I want to introduce to some and present to all our dear brother Dr. Jabril Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, bro, and happy Savior's Day, family.
Wa alaikum salam, and happy Savior's Day to you as well, to you and your family.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Praise be to Allah. Brother, if you would be so kind, just take us a bit into who you are, what you do, a bit of your background technically, and then we'll get into today's this evening's conversation.
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. Jabril Muhammad. I'm a human molecular geneticist. I'm an assistant professor at Morehouse School of Medicine, where the focus of my research is to understand how vitamin D impacts the underpinnings or the mechanisms involved in prostate cancer development in African American men, and potentially utilizing vitamin D and its active metabolites as adjuvant treatments or treatments and combined with already approved protocols for prostate cancer treatment, and being able to enhance the effects of vitamin D for the person that's in need.
Okay, now we STEM files, we pride ourselves in making sure that people can digest the information, right? So Elijah Mama teaches us too that whenever we come across a word we don't understand, to look it up and make sure we understand it. And I'm sure somebody's watching this didn't understand half of that. So get into it. What is prostate cancer? What about that in particular are you studying? Why are these particular groups of conditions so important?
Right. So it's important to understand that cancer in general is often defined as, although very much more complex than what I'm going to state right now, but it's often perceived as uncontrollable growth of tissue in an organ. And this uncontrollable growth becomes an obstruction. This obstruction can ultimately lead to impacting normal day-to-day functioning, ultimately leading to the transition or the death of a person. So the issue is that when it comes to certain cancer development, depending on the organ, some of which might be difficult to gain access to, let's say a brain tumor, right? Or brain cancer. You might have a cancer that you do have access to, such as ovarian cancer or prostate cancer. But the reality is that regardless of the difficulty of access to the tumor, it's important to understand how the tumor came about, what caused the tumor to begin with. And oftentimes in science, we like to say that cancer is a genetic disease. And what that means is that when we look into the tumor, we see that there are a lot of things going awry and going wrong. But ultimately, what we find is that there's a genetic issue that's causing the cell to go awry. And my duty and my job is to investigate what are some of the genetic reasons, some of these genes that impact protein function that ultimately impacts signaling cascades that are involved in telling the cell, hey, it's time to become cancerous, or it's time to move, which is the difference between a cancer that stays in a localized area then to become metastatic. So all of these are impacted by signals, proteins that are talking to proteins, cells that are talking to cells, and it's in between the talking, the signals, that we start to uncover how do we intervene and what things that we can do to enhance, to protect other cells from being affected, and ultimately benefiting the patient long haul.
Yes, sir. And did you just go into prostate cancer because of how it has made it such a negative impact on the population of Black men? Or
Absolutely. And a lot of my work in the publications that I have, the publications that I have published in the archives, and you can find it on Google Scholar under Jabril Johnson, which is my publication name. What we find is that prostate cancer, along with other cancers, they do disproportionately affect certain communities versus others. Prostate cancer being one that affects African-American men more so than their European counterparts, specifically the incident rates and mortality rates. So as far as incidents, we know as in 2024 going into 2025, the African-American men have a 1.7-fold increased prostate cancer incidence, 1.7, right? And as far as mortality, there's a gap between their European counterparts where African-American men are 2 times more likely to die from prostate cancer compared to their European counterparts. And so one would ask the question, what is the cause or what's underlying these disparities that we are observing, right, nationally? And this isn't even just simple discussion as far as national statistics that I'm giving here. This is also something that we see internationally as well. So men of African descent crossing the board, we are more and disproportionately burdened by prostate cancer incidence and prostate cancer mortality. And so therefore it became something very clear to me as far as a disease of disparity to further investigate, that I need to find myself often, I'll put it this way, I need to find myself impacted by this disease as it impacts my human family, right? And so it's important that we investigate these prostate cancer disparities, understand them from a genetic mechanistic approach, and for as far as me being a geneticist, uncover some of these signaling cascades that are causing the signals to transition from, let's say, one stage of cancer to another, that's ultimately impacting the disparities that we observe. So that's ultimately why I got into it. We know that it's a disparity that we see. We know that African American men are more, impacted by incident rates and mortality rates, but other cancers as well. I mean, we could talk about colon cancer. Colon cancer also has a disparity, right? And even outside of cancer disparity, health disparity. African Americans in general suffer from hypertension, cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, strokes, all of these things that we can name. So what I tend to tell individuals is that although my focus is prostate cancer, the genetics of understanding how the cell works is important to uncover many treatments that could help our people that suffer from these disorders and these diseases.
Praise be to Allah. Praise be to Allah. So, if I may, family, you may wonder what our brother's commentary, what his background has to do with tonight's subject. And there was a few things that you said that really stick out to me specifically in the context of tonight's conversation. You talked about cancer as uncontrollable growth, and you made mention of signaling, otherwise known as communication, between cells. Well, if cancer is uncontrollable growth, that means controlled growth is probably that which is conducive to life.
Correct.
And now signaling, which is really communication, will deal with on a personal level amongst our people. What are we talking about? How are we communicating amongst ourselves to be truly powerful? Now, if we can, Brother Tariq, I'd like to segue to which will allow us to really set the stage for tonight's episode. So our dear brother Dr. Jabril, made a Facebook post some time ago, and I read it several times. And Brother Tariq and I really fell in love with it. Said we have to talk about this for the first show. So I'm going to read it. So it says, "It is oft repeated that knowledge is power. We now know that the acquisition of wisdom, the knowledge of when, where, and how to apply that knowledge, is that which is truly power. However, I would argue one of the greatest impediments to acquiring this power is rooted in not knowing how to properly synthesize the knowledge to begin with. Remember, the physics definition of power is as follows. Power equals work divided by time." So let's talk about this, family. Here at the STEM Files, we want to remind everyone, we are not overly concerned with representation on this platform. I don't care that we had the first black VP or president of Xbox. I don't particularly care that another black business sold to another white person or non-black person for X amount of $1 million or what have you. I'm not even that concerned that you have an abundance of black-owned products in Target. What I'm concerned about, and what we are concerned about, or whether or not you have an abundance of black-owned products in Target, what we're concerned about on this platform is, can we as a people understand and move out on the science, the methodology of that which will truly make our community and our nation powerful? So with that, brother, I'm not going to go too much into it. What really made you post that? Take us into your mindset when you posted that. What was on your mind? What kind of led to that? And just kind of talk to us a bit about that, because it was very profound.
Yeah. So for those that might be familiar with my frequency of posting on Facebook, I'm not actually a frequent poster, right? And
That's why it stood
so,
out to me too.
yeah, I don't frequently post things. So there was a discussion that was had between me and the individual. And while discussing a certain point, it dawned on me that I've seen I've seen where the knowledge of power, where this actually became the crux of someone's argument, but also the downfall of someone's entire foundation. And it really took place with Billy Carson, our brother Billy Carson and Wesley Huff, right? Or Wes Huff. And I listened to that debate, or rather, we'll call it for what it was. It was structured as a conversation that ended up becoming a debate. And I realized that although it was handled amicably between both individuals, the blowback that our brother Billy Carson is facing now has a lot to do with what I posted. And I heard Dr. Wesley's his point of view regarding what happened. And I totally fell in love with his point of view because as a PhD myself, one of the things that I often discuss or I often convey to individuals is that reading isn't where it stops, right?
Right.
We all have the ability to acquire the knowledge, read so much that we could even delude ourselves to believing that we know, right? However, one thing that I often tell folks is that there is a way to critically think and synthesize that knowledge into something that's workable. And honestly, without going too deep into what, Billy Carson and, Wesley Huff talked about, what really needs to be understood about that discussion was that our brother Billy Carson reads. That brother reads. A lot. He is well read, without a shadow of a doubt. And so that debate, or what became of a debate, was not due to him not knowing, right? What it was really due to was his lack of ability to then synthesize what he knew or what he read. That was the art. That's, to me, the crux of how that debate concluded. Wesley Huff brought up to him several times during that discussion that what you read was an artifact. That isn't seen in, our line of work or this research realm. What you read isn't seen as a document that is seen as being held true. And at certain points in that discussion or that debate, you heard our brother he conceded several points. And he had to say, well, I'll let you have that. Well, then let's flip to another subject or discussion, right? And so it was at that moment where I said to myself, I think it needs to be stated that we can, you can have access to all of these books. But if you don't know how to synthesize what you're reading into something that's workable, then you can easily be as misled as the individual who have never read at all.
Come on. Good teaching. That's right.
And that's the problem, right? That's the problem. And so when we address that problem, I addressed it from a mathematical model. And that mathematical model was more so that which I'm familiar with, which is physics. We know what the definition of force is from a physics standpoint: mass times acceleration. We know the definition of work from a physics standpoint, which is force times distance. The idea of power, somehow, we talk about it, but we talk about it in such a political landscape or influenced, position. And really, when you think about it from its most rudimentary definition, power, even from the mathematical sense, is really work divided by time.
Right.
That's all that's all that it is. The ability to do work in a less amount of time is power. So when one says, I am truly powerful, what they're alluding to is the idea to accomplish something in a less amount of time. So the question then becomes, well, how do we accomplish whatever it is that we need to accomplish, whether individually or collectively? What is it that we need? What is it that we have to have mentally? What type of knowledge would allow us to decrease the amount of time needed to accomplish that work, which would make us indeed powerful?
You know, Dr. Jabril,
I pray y'all listening. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
My wheels are spinning right now because, we're talking about power, and you brought up something very important about how generally we look at power as some type of political, vantage point or what have you. But I wanted to ask you, with so much that you've done in science already, in your, in academia and the private sector, and now back to academia, right?
Right.
What do you see yourself using your power to eventually do in science and research? What do you see your ultimate goal being?
That's a great question. I find it being twofold, right? Specifically, you heard me talk about my feelings and thoughts regarding how the diseases that we face as a people, how they affect me and my thoughts about them, surrounding them, right? So which means that there's a level of where my work has to translate to impact the populace.
Yes.
Right? It has to impact the people. It has to touch the people. I have to touch the people. And then on the other hand, I have to be so forward thinking as an investigator, as a scientist, where I have to find the gaps in literature in order to hypothesize something that has not been thought of or pondered before, to then investigate, to potentially identify groundbreaking treatment protocols or groundbreaking ideologies that would shift medicine, or that would shift the realm of science to the degree where textbooks have to be rewritten.
Yes.
With new knowledge that is being proposed, right? Or new knowledge that is being cemented and solidified. And so for me, being that I speak to both fronts, I hope to, one, constantly be in the spirit where my thoughts are constantly being turned and renewed to find those gaps where literature doesn't have an answer for, right? Where I can then investigate, find what needs to be found to, or rather unearth what needs to be found, so that that solution or that conclusion could then be translated to the people who are suffering on a day-to-day basis, so that they can have an intervention that will be beneficial for their day-to-day activities. So that's ultimately what I do on a daily basis, and what I'm striving to then utilize my power for, because power is nothing more than the influence to do something, right? To actually move, to actually shift power, right? And so that's what I hope to do in my studies and what I'm actually doing with these publications, right? So we take the work that we then generate, or the data that we generate in the lab,
right,
we publish it after it's peer reviewed by our peers in the field, and then that publication is disseminated. But even after it's disseminated, it is my job to take that work and break it down into layman terms, where I could then go out to the people and have a discussion and tell them why it's important that they have proper levels of vitamin D, or how much vitamin D should they be taking as African American men and women who are innately deficient in vitamin D as it is already. You see what I'm saying? So that's how we make that work real. And even when we go back to the definition of power, work, and we go back to the definition of force, all of it is in alignment with how we have to work in order to make our work impactful for change.
Yes, sir. And you know, the STEM files is definitely one of those tools that you're using, that you can definitely use in the future to make that your work more digestible to directly to the community. Jabril?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. So as we're talking about physics, my mind goes to vectors. And one of the things I always liked about vectors is that they have both magnitude and direction. Now, when we're talking about power, work, force, these are all concepts that have large or small magnitudes depending upon the numbers associated with the variables. But what
Correct.
about the direction? So now we're exerting a force, but in what direction?
That's
We're
right.
striving to do work, but in what direction? We're
Mhm.
striving to be powerful, but where are we going? There lies the conundrum, the science of Black power. So as a people who, as individuals, a lot of us do things and acquire assets and make moves to be seen of men. And we engage Black capitalism as a sort of substitute, and a poor one at that, for Black liberation. And now we wonder why we have so many people popping up, this millionaire, this person got money, what have you. But as a people, we seem to be treated with the same level of disrespect, and we have the same level of dis-ease or dis-ease.
Mhm.
Maybe it's because we have a lot of magnitude, but poor direction. So where should we be going? Well, if we go to the other post, Brother Tariq, I like to go into that.
Yes, sir.
So my dear brother, he's a fellow member of the Fruit of Islam out of Chester, Pennsylvania, brother Elijah Kareem. He made a public post on Facebook. And he said, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't say Allah was going to convince us, persuade us, or trick us to separate. He said Allah is going to
Force.
force us to separate. Force, strength, or energy exerted or brought to bear, cause of motion or change, active power. The messenger statement alone implies we're not going to want to. What did such do we expect to happen that would force Black people to finally want to separate and do for ourselves? So, what are we talking about? That's the direction. We should be applying force as a vector in the direction of separation. We talk about infrastructure and Black-owned banks and supermarkets and recreation and distribution, right? But those things will only render us to be a better tool for the current power structure as long as we see that as the end all be all and don't allow ourselves to think beyond the current paradigm.
Mm.
When you believe that what is in place is the best it's going to get, and you just have to retool to be a better version of yourself in that paradigm, you will do things that by default extend the paradigm.
Mhm.
So the direction we need to go in is separation to now be truly powerful. Because remember, the nature of power is to defend itself, meaning that power recognizes power.
Right.
Power only defends itself against that which it deems a threat.
Mhm.
That's right.
So
That's
now
right.
that we've outlined Black power, brother Dr. Jabril, I'm curious, the science of, let's break that down. What does that mean to you from a level of methodology or whatever? How do we begin to approach Black power, not only as individuals, but as a nation that's not a monolith?
Right. You know, it's interesting because I was just thinking on that, title that you all so beautifully chosen to have the discussion over tonight.
Thank you.
And it's it's interesting because one could actually work through the physics formulas that we just talked about, from force, work, and power, and how it overlays with some of the movements that we're familiar with today. Essentially, one could argue and say that nothing gets done without motion,
Right.
movements, and we've had several movements throughout our history, throughout our time. But it's important to understand, well, what is a movement and the impact of a movement as it relates to the formulas that we just talked about. Because the question then bears in mind, well, what happened to those movements? Whatever happened to those movements? Are they still in motion? If they aren't, then it's our responsibility to investigate the flaws, how we can then reconfigure, so that we can enhance the power of the movement, or recreate another, or rather create another movement that will be impactful, learning from our ancestors, right?
Right.
So I thought of civil movements in general, not necessarily just the civil rights movements, just civil movements in general, right? The idea is that it starts with a person or some people. Force, now we keep this formula in mind. Force equals mass times acceleration.
Right.
Right? Force equals mass times acceleration. So before we can talk about force, you have to acquire mass.
Right. Right.
You have to acquire mass. How many of you, how many of us are like-minded that can band together, right? And banding together to increase mass also dictates how fast we go, right? So this mass gains an acceleration, and with this acceleration comes force, right?
Yes, sir.
So when we talk about the civil movements, it's important that they are constructed. The foundation is that they are constructed with those that are like-minded, well-structured. So when there's an acceleration, it is moving at one pace, thus increasing force.
In the same direction. Come on. That's right.
So then we move to the next formula, right? Which is work equals force times distance.
Right.
Force times distance. So we have those that band together, that are like-minded, gaining an acceleration in a direction, increasing force. But that in itself means nothing if there isn't something acted upon.
Right. Come on.
Right? So then something has to be acted upon. There has to be an agenda for the mass that has gained acceleration. So with this agenda, the like-minded who have band together, increase in acceleration, they all are in agreement. This is what we must do, and this is the order in which we get it done.
Come on. Come on.
So the distance of the objective has to be measured from A to B.
Right.
Right? And the way that we identify work is the force applied to that object and how far it moved.
That's right. Come on. Come on.
That's how we define work. So if one were to say, hey, I put so much work in, I'm exhausted.
Come on.
Well, someone who's a scientist will look at it and say, well, let me gauge your exhaustion based on what was actually moved.
Right.
Come on. Come on.
Right. From A to B. And that will determine how much force was then utilized to then say, okay, I can understand why you're exhausted. Or I can say, I don't think exhausted is the right word that you mean. I don't think that's the right word. right?
Right.
That's right. That's right.
And so, again, going back to civil movements, like-minded, banded together, this agenda. We all believe, we all agree that this is the way that we're supposed to get XYZ done, and then we start moving on it, right? We start moving on it, whatever it is, distance from A to B. That's how work is determined. That's how work is defined. That is the metric. And then we get to power.
Right.
Then we get to power. Because it's only by how effective and efficient the mass, the body, the movement has actually moved said object from A to B in the time that it took to do it, that is defined as how powerful that group or movement is.
Come on. That's right.
We work through three fundamental definitions in physics, talking about force, work, and power. Three concepts that are often talked about in today's culture, today's reality, just throughout your normal day-to-day activities, but people have very little understanding of what those three actually mean.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
What it actually means. So when that post, when I thought of it to actually post my ideas and thoughts, I stated that it's really the synthesis of that knowledge that becomes power. It's the synthesis. Because at the end of the day, I could read as many books as I would like. I can gain all of the equipment necessary. I could drive the fastest car. I can get everything that I need, right? But if I don't know how to utilize it to something that's workable, then at the end of the day, it does nothing for me. And in essence, I lose power, become powerless.
Come on, go ahead.
And so there are many different aspects to when I look or assess a civil movement. There are many different aspects that I would begin to tease apart or begin to delineate to understand what went wrong. What went wrong in the actual movement of the movement? Was it the acquisition of the knowledge? Was it that we weren't on all one accord? Were we divided, although in the collective? Because that's important too. That's what you just talked about. It being directional. It has to be directional. The intent has to be made known. If there is any alteration in that direction, not only is power immediately affected, but so is force.
That's right.
Because there is no banding together. There is no acceleration of the mass in one direction. Therefore, force decreases.
Right.
Force decreases, and therefore impact is not made. Right.
Right.
And therefore, ultimately, power becomes powerless.
Yes.
Man.
STEM Files is back, baby. Praise God.
Praise be to God.
We at that half minute, that half point, the STEM Files, where we like to do our quick commercial break, where we talk about the flagship product of the Nation of Islam, Black owned and operated newspaper, and that's the Final Call newspaper. So family, let's check it out.
Now you can get the same uncompromising truth you've come to expect from the Final Call newspaper on all your connected devices. Subscribe to the Final Call digital edition today. Go to subscribe.finalcalldigital.com.
This is Sister Ilyasa. We're at the National Training Convention, and you're watching the STEM Files.
All right, and Jabril, this week's edition of the Final Call newspaper. Every edition of the Final Call newspaper is special. But this particular issue of the Final Call newspaper has some very special content on the front page. So, Jabril, can you delve into that for us?
Yes, sir. Praise be to Allah. Family, again, the Final Call newspaper is the flagship news source, and really, outside of the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, the number one minister of the Nation of Islam. In this latest issue, volume 44, number 17, it is titled Watch the Weather. Several southern states and tens of millions of people are still in the aftermath of what was described as a deadly, once in a generation winter storm. Family, before I get into more of the Final Call, very, very briefly, I want to chide those of us who are believers in God, believers in a higher power. Let's strive to not always disassociate things that we deem as not good or disastrous as separate from God. All
Yeah.
right. We want to talk about global warming and certain things with climate change or what have you. But, we're taught and we learn in the Nation of Islam what makes it, who makes rain, hail, snow, and earthquakes. And I understand that most people, if not all, who believe in God, believe in a God who is supreme and in power over all things. So maybe it's something that you need to look deeper into to understand why God's active or permissive will is in play here and what the lesson is for you. So whether it's the fires in the Palisades or in California or in Maui or the East Coast and South with snow and ice and sleet. There's something going on here. And if we look at the spiritual condition of America, we may come to the conclusion that America has earned God's wrath. So get your latest edition of the Final Call newspaper today. If you like to read it on your phone, tablet, or laptop, go to finalcalldigital.com and set up your digital subscription and get it to your device of choice every week. And if you're in the Philadelphia, Atlanta, Richmond areas or other areas and you want to get it physically, you want to hold that paper in your hand and highlight and underline and everything, tap in with your brothers at the STEM Files or tap in with us on as individuals on social media so we can go ahead and let you know how you can do that yourself, family. The Final Call newspaper, a message dedicated to the resurrection of the Black men and women of America and the world. Let's get it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for that, beloved. So now that we are starting to wrap up this particular episode, and we will be having you back, Doc, for parts 1 and 2 and 3, because matter of fact, I can go down your page and make all your post episodes in their own right.
They only get one a year, so they all be gems. We only get one a year. Like,
Praise be to Allah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we thoroughly enjoyed this episode. We've definitely got a lot more out of it than we expected. We're talking about the science of Black power, right? Now, as a molecular geneticist and biomedical scientist, how have you seen your understanding of force and power be executed in your work so far?
That's a great question. I would say that I'm blessed to be part of a group here at Morehouse School of Medicine and my colleagues that we're very interested and very intentional about edifying and educating our brothers and sisters in the community. Not even just our brothers and sisters just because of commonality of skin color, but also other marginalized populations as well. And what I've seen thus far is the idea, right? The idea, so we go back to this movement, the idea of one who then shares it with another and says, hey, this is a great idea. This should be the frontier. We should lead and spearhead this initiative to be found more in our communities discussing prostate cancer for our brothers because they do not trust the medical system. They
Right.
do not trust their physicians. They do not trust all of the things that has been espoused or talked about via media, right? And for good reason. So it's our responsibility for those of us who have the knowledge to bring that to the people to edify, to educate, so that we can be held responsible for increasing the health literacy of our people who suffer on a day-to-day basis from these conditions that we talk about. And so my colleagues here have shared this idea amongst us. We banded together, right? Accelerated our initiatives, accelerated thoughts, accelerated brainstorming ideologies to the point where we have programs set up where we are reaching out to our brothers and sisters in the Christian churches here in Atlanta, Georgia, and the suburbs surrounding Georgia, where we are talking to the pastors, talking to those that lead the flock.
Yes, sir.
Getting them to not only be the voice spiritually for our brothers to then take hold and take their health seriously, but also allowing us a platform to then talk to directly to our brothers and sisters, talk to the wives of the husbands, so that the wives can be educated to go home and talk to their husbands and say, hey, have you had a prostate screening yet? What is your PSA levels? Right?
Come on.
This is specific. This is specific to my work here, one aspect of it. But it just goes to show how mass that has accelerated, which is force times distance, which is defined as work, has allowed us to be in the communities and have these events where we're bringing out hundreds, 200s, 300s of our brothers and sisters who are getting free prostate cancer screening on the spot, who otherwise would not have gone to their primary care physician, who otherwise would not have gone to the hospital because of the distrust that they have for the system overall. And allowing us, someone that looks like them, be able to come back to our labs, process their blood, give them their results directly. This is an example of what mass times acceleration, which equals force times distance, which equals work. And now when it comes to how powerful we are as far as the unit that has been comprised, is our ability to do what we've already been doing at less amount of time.
That's right.
Efficiency, right.
So our abilities to go out when we have these screening events, hit our brothers and sisters with the quick 1-2. We're here to educate. We're here because we love you. We take the samples back to our lab. The quicker we get them processed, the quicker we get the results back to our people, the quicker they're able to make their appointments to their primary care physicians. These are my numbers. Otherwise, I would not have known. What are some options for me? Because again, prostate cancer is 100% curable if caught early.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we often talk about. Most cancers, if caught early, can be dealt with. It's the fact that we often catch these cancers later on, when they have already become aggressive, when they have already metastasized, that disables us to do a lot, where the options are then slim. Doesn't allow us to then increase our ability to treat. The only thing we can then do at that point is increase quality of life. Right? Yes, so before we get to that stage, it's important that we address the early signs. And if it's the early signs as early as PSA levels, then let's get those screenings done. Especially for our brothers that's over the age of 45. Let's get it done.
You know, Doc, as I'm hearing you talk about how you engage with the community, I can't help but overhear the FOI training in there.
Yes, sir.
Right.
How have you been able to take what you learned as an FOI, apply it to your science, and then combine that and take it out into the community? How have you seen that the similarities between going out in the field with the word, and now you going out in the field with your science? How have you been able to?
One thing I'm gonna always say is that the people respond to love.
Yes.
Right.
The people respond to love, and oddly enough, for those who have become professionals, gotten their degrees, acquired their advanced degrees in whatever science it might be, we have gotten to a point, not all of us, but a lot of us have gotten to the point where we sit in the ivory tower, right? and we become
Come on.
disassociated with the people who put us there.
Come on.
And so whenever the time comes for us to then give back or make any advances to dealing with the people, or let's say we need samples from the people, or we need the people to, let's say, accelerate some science that we're doing in the labs, they have no trust for us because they don't know us. And therefore it becomes like a hazing process where we used to be a part of the flock, but they have to haze us in order for them to gain some type of trust for us again. So the key to it is for them not to lose trust in the beginning.
Right.
You know, and the only training that I know that has been consistent with showing face in the communities, most of which our people have become disavowed by and often disconnected with, the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam is the only entity that I know as far as how the system operates, where when we go into the community, there's a sense of love, a sense of pride, a sense of belonging, where they know that they're protected. They know that there's a sense of love and appreciation, and so that they give. They give. And this reminds me of one of the true definitions of the sheep to the shepherd. One of the true definitions, if we were to break it down scientifically, now, I'm not here to speak scripturally, but just from a scientific perspective, the sheep, or metaphorically, the reason that they're called sheep is because they're looking for the protection, the guidance, the initiative to provide food, shelter, and for that, they will give you the wool off of their backs.
Come on.
As
Come
an
on.
exchange. And the wool off of their backs then translates to the ability to make clothes, the ability to then be provided economics, right? But it's through the people that comes from. So a good shepherd, as the scriptures talk about, understands that transaction.
Right.
And so the Nation of Islam acts as proxies to the good shepherd. And it's our duty and responsibility to ensure that we protect, that we guide, that we teach, that we provide the shelter, the food, the nourishment needed for our people, so that they then provide the wool off of their back, so that we can continue to then do what it is that's necessary for the flock. You know, and so with that being said, for me, that's the energy that I go into the community with. I know
That's
my
technical
training.
difficulties, family. There we go. All right, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So that's the energy that I go into the community with. I go into it with the energy of, these are my people from which I was created. It is my responsibility to show the love. It is my responsibility to do all that which is dutiful and duty bound to the good shepherd, being that I'm a proxy of such. If that's my duty and responsibility, then the response will be nothing less than, here, this is what you need from me, and this is what you need to continue your research.
Yes, sir.
Because I know ultimately this is going to help us. That is what the wool off of their backs translate to.
Yes. And if I may, as we get ready to close, I just want to say thank you, because what we showed tonight, I hope, is that word synthesis, the bringing together of the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to give a view of a solution. One of the things that has to be understood is the gap between work and power is a bridge called a system. I'm going to say that again. The gap, or the distance between work and power, is a bridge called a system. Systems are how you become powerful. It's the reason why all over social media you have these different gurus across different platforms talking about putting systems in place in order to scale your business. When you scale a business, what does that mean? You're trying to be able to impact more people in the same amount of time or less, meaning you're trying to make your business more powerful.
That's right.
So, brother has been talking about cancer off and on, but what about the spiritual cancers? Can we see those early on? Can we get rid of the cancer of distrust? Can we get rid of the cancer of backbite? Can we get through the cancer of envy and jealousy? Can we get through the cancer of self-depreciation or feeling like I'm enough? I'm not enough. A nigga ain't nothing. Ain't never gonna be nothing. Never was nothing. Can we get out of mental death and darkness to be able to see that we are not simply black in STEM, but black is STEM.
Right.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And I think at that point we will understand that we can be truly powerful because we can exert a lot of work in a very, very short amount of time. So
That's right.
I just want to say thank you so much, brother Dr. Jabril, for gracing us with your presence. I keep forgetting where you located. I gotta tap in with you real soon. We gotta get some coffee somewhere.
Praise be to
I'm not. You might be a tea man. You might be a tea man. I don't know if you're a tea. I like tea too. We can do that.
Yes, sir.
I
Yes,
don't
sir.
know. Tea, bean soup, coffee, whatever. Video games. We gonna figure it out.
Yes, sir.
We gonna figure it out. Praise be to Allah. But brother
Brother
Tariq.
He said Morehouse. He's right where you at.
Mhm.
That's why I said. I forgot where he was. That's why we gotta get together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, and what are the chances of both Jabrils ending up in Atlanta within the last 2 years? That's crazy, right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
Hey,
sir.
All right, family. This is the last 5 minutes of the STEM Files. Once again, I echo my brother's words. We want to thank you for joining us on the platform. Is there anything you would like to leave the audience with before we go?
There is something that I want to leave with, and unfortunately, it's a complex topic because it's really targeted to the Muslims in the Nation of Islam because of what I'm about to say comes directly out of the teachings. One of the great examples of what it is that we were talking about comes from a problem that was in our problem book in the Supreme Wisdom, problem number 31, right? Where it talks about the lion in the cave, the lion in the cage that was once walking at a specific space, in a specific pace, in that space.
Right.
And then comes with new technology, new equipment, the ability to then walk 3,000 feet per second from the 60 that we were previously walking, right? So the question that, that problem in the book is very much so correlative to the importance of synthesizing the knowledge so that we comprehend, so we know what to do with equipment to quicken our pace and quicken our motion, quicken the movement. Because the space where we are in, whether individually and or collectively, is definitely correlative and proportionate to the knowledge that we have. Now, no one would dare say that we are not knowledgeable,
Right.
but one could argue that we are ignorant. And in our ignorance, because we're not doing with what we know, it is impacting our speed and our ability to find that door to get out of that cage that we were in.
Good teaching. Good.
So that's something that I will leave us with. And I think it's very important that we focus on how we synthesize knowledge, not be so much so bent on acquiring different disparate sources of knowledge, but it's important that we synthesize it, sit down with that knowledge and synthesize it in a manner where it becomes workable to your own individual growth, your own individual life, your own individual situations, so that you can ultimately become powerful with the knowledge that you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, family, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Jabril, again. In the next few weeks or so, if your schedule permits. But I wanted to take some time out before we can conclude to acknowledge some of the audience. We have Brother Ian Muhammad, Brother Tony Muhammad, Brother Malik Muhammad Jr., who's also a biomedical scientist. Ian Muhammad, of course, Dr. Akili from the Ultimate Wellness Group. My beloved mother, Sister Kubila Muhammad. Brother Christopher John. Jabril's mother, Sister Kimberly Muhammad. And then, that's about it. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we want to once again express our condolences to Brother David Hassan's family. He is, if not the #1 supporter of the STEM Files platform. we thank Allah for him and his family. But this again, family, again, this has been another edition of the STEM Files, where we serve as the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. And as Jabril always says, STEM is not, I'm gonna let him do this part. What is STEM, beloved?
Well, like I was saying before, as far as who we are, right, as the voice of STEM talent and Black culture, right, Black is not a color, right? It's the essence from which all color comes, and it forms the very fabric of reality. So we're not simply Black in STEM, as representation has never been our goal, but we want to understand that Black is STEM. Those things are joined together as they form the very basis of everything we see. And if we understand it as a people, we will definitely go far. So the next time you read your self-help book, read your Quran or Bible, try to take a course, try to test yourself and see how powerful you can become with those skills applied, family. So until next time, Jabril engineer, Tariq Cardiac, our dear brother, Dr. Jabril Muhammad. This is the science of Black Power, family. Love y'all so much. Peace, family.
Peace.
Peace and blessings.
You believe in these false prophets, I say I bet he lying. No football, New York City Giants. Girl dad, rest in peace to Kobe Bryant. When we teaching our babies, we teach them heavy science. Heavy science. Heavy science. When we teaching our women, we teach them heavy science. Heavy science. Heavy science.